Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the February 2nd Groundhog Day 2022 Abington Finance Committee meeting. We are continuing to meet on Zoom thanks to the COVID pandemic and the Omicron spike. We are continuing our series of meeting with department heads and going over the FY23 proposed budget. Tonight, we have the South Shore Vocational Technical School with us. We have from there the superintendent, Tom Hickey, and we have a couple of reps. We've got Jim Coughlin and Tom Petrozelli. And we will also have our town inspectional services, the Board of Health, the building department, etc., that will be presented by our town manager, Scott Lambiase, and our town treasurer collector and finance director, Sonia Hodge. And then we will go through our regular business of liaison reports, correspondence, and reviewing minutes. And we actually do have minutes to review this time, yay. And so we shall get right to it and welcome the folks from South Shore Vocational Technical School. We love meeting with them. We definitely always get a very good presentation from them, and we're looking forward to hearing this year's information. Tom and Jim, welcome.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you guys for coming.
Thanks, Matt.
So Tom, why don't you give us a start?
Sure thing. In the interest of time, I'll focus on some assessment numbers with one of the docs that I can share. But I want to thank all of you again for your continued support. When we were last on Zoom a year ago, if I do a quick rewind, we were successful in getting all 8 of our communities to adopt the debt authorization, which we're grateful for, that we're in a position now to be able to tackle some capital projects. And I'll speak to that briefly as part of how that fits into the assessments. When I spoke about that last year, a lot of it hinged on what we thought we would reasonably tackle in a series of phases. And also, as I've told you for 7 years now, we await the Mass School Building Authority's hopeful invitation. Normally, it's a December decision. They've delayed it till March. Okay. But in any event, so I don't have anything specific to report on that. I should have something to report by early March. So we're bringing a budget, an overall budget increase of 1.81%. That aggregate number is important, but only to a limited extent, because it's really mostly important in terms of what are you doing differently, and then how does it impact our individual towns. And the highlights from my presentation essentially focused on a lot of what schools are dealing with now with the pandemic, with increased resources for social emotional supports. We're building in a social worker to our staff, which has been instrumental. We have some additional funds that are going to be used to help address increased student enrollment, increased student interest in a couple of our programs. I'm hoping to convert a couple of technical aid positions in our electrical and horticulture landscape program into teaching positions. So I think this is an operating budget that's responsive to the needs of the students and also to the times that we're in right now, with everything ranging from additional support in our cafeteria, custodians. I would honestly tell you that one of the biggest needs that we're facing, as we all see in the news about the, I don't want to say it's the great resignation, but certainly fluctuations in the job market, are credentialed bus drivers. That is definitely, we have our own buses, we employ our own drivers, and that has certainly been a challenge. The good news for us is that historically we've had our custodial staff trained as licensed bus drivers, and so they have done unbelievable work. So the blizzard last week notwithstanding, that was another amazing thing that they helped to prepare our school for. But they are also our substitute drivers, so we're able to keep the wheels moving for the kids morning and afternoon. I'll share a document that I had forwarded regarding the assessments, and can you all see that?
I can.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. I'll cherry pick a few pieces of information out of this. I We always enjoy putting this together. I appreciate all the time that Jim puts in. We want to try to anticipate questions, and when you're away from your meetings and you revisit some of the information we provide, that hopefully it spells out how are we arriving at the numbers we're seeking. So I'll just kind of moderate my pace here, and by all means, if there are questions, I'd be happy to be interrupted, or you can certainly wait to the end. The first page of the document gives everybody an overview of the money we think is going to come in, and of course, the budget that we're looking for. So what we're projecting here, make it a little bigger. You can see that?
Yep.
The governor's budget from last week has us tagged as receiving about $540,000 of an increased Chapter 70 aid. The formula is complicated in a normal year, but when you have a year where you have a higher inflation rate, you have the Student Opportunity Act adding more money to that formula. It definitely, there's a lot to explain, and there's a lot of good information on the DESE website that attempts to unpack where the numbers come from. The reason this number is fortunate for us is that the next line down, the non-resident tuition, we knew a year ago, as we were graduating students from outside of our district, we've had an increased interest from within the district. Mm-hmm. So we knew that tuition was going to be down. And the question that I posed to our school committee in December was, we know what the drop off in revenue will be. Where will Chapter 70 fall? I'm very happy with the answer, because the delta between these two numbers, I was concerned that it was going to be a much bigger gap. If the Chapter 70 figures are less, then the difference is covered by the communities. We're also anticipating a slight increase in our regional transportation aid, and the rest of the income, of course, would come from district assessments. So that's on the revenue side. And then we have our budget, of course. And now the breakdown by town you can find in the middle of this page. So here's Abington. Abington has an increase of 9 students, and we're proposing an assessment for Abington that clocks in at $1,317,835, which is an increase of $37,260. At first blush, you might say, gee, 9 kids, increase of 37,000. You might not want to say it out loud, but it seems modest in terms of if you were to just looking at it simplistically from a per pupil point of view. What I would be saying this year to our friends in Abington and in Rockland and in Whitman and in Hanson, the 4 communities that make up about 80% of the district, is that as we telegraphed a year ago, with the debt authorization, we would not be carrying capital budgets as heavy. And so the capital portion of the town's assessments went down considerably. As a result, the towns that carried the biggest capital burden in their budgets saw an offset. So later in the document, you'll be able to see what was Abington's share of the state formula, and that number was about $97,000 higher. So that number is a little more inflated, but the result, the variance, is actually $37,000, which I would attribute mostly to a significantly lower capital budget. The bottom of this document spells out per pupil costs. We find that our communities like to see the translation. They want to keep tabs on the range of per pupil costs. As we've said before, the Chapter 70 formula, the state formula, accounts for about 70% of our budget, and the per pupil costs are based on a town's ability to pay. And that's where you would see a range. And this has been relatively consistent. You can see Jim has put together numbers showing the delta between the 2 years, which also changes with the number of kids that are enrolled. The next landscape page here is a breakdown of that 1.317 I mentioned a moment ago. So if we just look at the Abington column, you can see the component parts of the assessment. The first number, $1,062,966, is the minimum local contribution as calculated by the state. When we collect non-resident tuition in one year, we hold it and we use it as an offset in the following year. That's the next line that says non-resident tuition, and you see it in the negative. Abington's share of the tuition we collected is referenced in the 166,025 coming off the top. Any operating costs that are above this minimum local contribution are calculated based on student enrollment, and that's the next figure here. Transportation costs are also considered an operating cost. They are calculated the same way. We take our total transpo cost that's eligible for reimbursement, we deduct 80%, and we divide up the remainder amongst our communities, and that would be Abington's share of the 23,066. Debt service, you'll see debt service is, last year debt service was 0. So I want to just hit the pause button here and pick up the debt service conversation. What we did is we budgeted $70,000 to spread out amongst our 8 communities with the following. This was our play. That halfway through next fiscal year, if we implement the first phase of our phased-in capital projects, that amount equates to what 2% interest on $7 million would cost, about $70,000. Now, my assessment, lowercase a assessment of the situation is, first, we're going to see what happens with MSBA. And what I would have said last spring, talking about the debt authorization, is that if we're invited into the MSBA program, we will have to call a timeout on our ideas. And we have to look very carefully at the pros and cons of wanting to take on capital projects for which we would be 100% responsible versus delaying some projects if we're invited into the eligibility period and ultimately into a program where the state could cover half the cost. So we are well positioned to take care of this school, but we're not going to do something so quickly until we find out. We'll wait a little bit longer. Giving us until January of 2023 is more than enough time for us to survey where we stand after this next round with the school building authority. So I'd close with this. If it turns out that we do not borrow money, this portion of the assessment would be reduced. And that's something that Jim would reconcile with all of our communities near the end of the fiscal year. So I would say for now, that debt service is a placeholder. I think it's a reasonable estimate based on timing and what we would use it for, or the amount we would need. But that may turn out that 70,000 is a goose egg, and therefore we would give the assessments a haircut at the end. And the final line is based on capital. Capital is based on a 3-year rolling average. And these are the numbers that the drop off compared to last year is what would make our high enrolled communities see a more modest increase in this budget cycle. This page concludes showing a 1-year look back. So the total increase, 37,260, is what we'd be seeking compared to last year. And that equates to about a 2.91% increase. Can I pause here and see if I'll go back to the view here in case I don't have everybody on the screen. If you want to just shout out, can I answer any questions for anybody before I proceed?
Looking, I don't see anybody.
Yep. So sorry, I just had a couple of quick questions. So I'm new to the board, so I didn't have the benefit of last year's discussion. So what are you proposing with the MSBA? Are you building a new school or capital or improvements on the existing, or?
You certainly all are aware of new construction and how lengthy and intense that process is. If you were asking me personally, I would come right out of the gate and say, we do not need a new school. We need an ad reno, but people smarter than me are going to come in with a feasibility study and create a nice whole menu of options as to what could be done. But if I were offering my opinion, it would be, the school has good bones. We need to modernize the 1962 parts of the building, and we need more functional space. We did a facilities assessment in 2018. A firm gave us some pretty good ideas. So that's my take on it. What I understand from the process is we've got to go through the due diligence. MSBA doesn't want to, it might sound good to say ad reno is cheaper, but like when they say free isn't always free, I suppose someone might say an ad reno might be great for 10 years and then you realize you made a mistake. But I live in the district as a taxpayer. I think this school can stand on its own with some ad reno. I would ask that question thoughtfully as a taxpayer. But I hope we have the opportunity to debate this with a feasibility study because we've been invited into MSBA. So stay tuned on that.
All right, sounds good. And then can you just explain what non-resident tuition means?
Absolutely. So we have enrolled students in our school from outside our 8 towns. The state sets a non-resident tuition rate per pupil. When a student comes here from a town that is not part of our district, we assess that town a per pupil cost. It's set by the state. It's tied to the foundation formula. It's no more than 125% of our per pupil costs. The non-resident community also has to cover the cost of their own transportation. So we collect that money, and then when we're building the following year's budget, we use it as an offset, and that allows us to reduce the assessments to our member communities.
Great, thank you very much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. The next page.
Real quick, Tom.
I'm sorry, Matt. Go ahead.
Just making sure. Is there anyone else on the committee that has any other questions at this point? Daniel,
I'm good, Matt.
Take yourself off mute.
No, I was just saying I don't.
All right. Yeah, because we definitely like Drew. We have several new members this year, so just trying to make sure that everybody gets their questions answered. I thought Drew's questions were great questions. Definitely good things to bring up, because you won't be the only one with those questions. So
that's right. That's great. All set, Matt. Want me to continue?
Yes, please. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you. So the next page, what Jim has put together here is a breakdown of the earlier page and how the math behind it. So really in the weeds here, but good to have it in writing, how we calculate different parts of the assessment, leaving the Chapter 70 numbers to the DESE website and those monster Excel sheets. The stuff that isn't part of that formula, we calculate based on our regional agreement. So I said earlier that any costs above the minimum, as well as transportation, we use the enrollment from our most recent October 1 report, the number of Abington kids in the numerator, the total number of district kids in the denominator. That's the percentage, and that's how we get the above minimum number combined with transpo. With debt service, we use the 3 fiscal years that precede the year when the debt is authorized. So if we get the debt authorized in fiscal 21, we look at the enrollments from fiscals 18, 19, and 20. And the debt service amount, unlike capital, which is a little bit later on the sheet, the debt service amount is fixed based on these shares. So if in 2 years we borrow a little bit more, we would go back to these fixed numbers. When we had a 10-year note, when we did a roof project, I would have told you the same exact story. It was the same, that until the interest started to drop off, it was essentially the same proportion by town during the life of the borrowing. So these numbers will be referenced at any point when we're accessing some of that money, like the $70,000 I mentioned earlier. This is the math we used to come up with that number. And there's Abington's share there, 11,822. And then finally, the capital costs. 1 year rolls off, we roll on another year to calculate the rolling average. A 3-year rolling average for capital has proven to be very helpful because it helps to manage any spikes, 1-year spikes or dips in enrollment. And that was the wisdom behind building that into our agreement. This page here, the document gives a high-level summary of our numbers, what we spent to close out fiscal 21, the budget for this year, and the proposed numbers going forward by rough classification. The student-related number here took a big dip because of the pandemic. These are our extracurriculars and whatnot. The capital expenditures here refer to money that $150,000 in stabilization for building and building renovation needs, and $70,000 for a dump truck. I feel very good about where our long-range capital plan is. Our vocational programs are, as I've told you in the past, they understand that we can pretty much meet everybody's needs as long as nobody has a last-minute, poorly planned, high-priced request. They are doing a great job. We're very competitive with state grants, skills capital grants, and we're managing those funds. So very rarely am I coming to our towns with an on-budget, real game changer for vocational equipment. That helps me. And then the last couple of pages here round out information from the DESE website. Jim's put the link in here if you're interested, and it just shows you, again, the biggest numbers of the chart we provide you. Where are we getting those from? And this is where we get them from. The state, the DESE page on Chapter 70, which shows our town enrollments, out-of-district enrollment. And then very, very focused last page on the change in the minimum local contribution. 1,000 numbers ago, I said, hey, Abington's minimum went up by 97 and change. But yet I've told you earlier that the assessment's actually only up 37. That's what the formula calculated based on, in large part, based on that increase of 9 students, but the lower capital costs offset that. And that's where we ended up with the number 37,260. So I'm happy to tackle phase 2 of any questions, but that's the extent of the document.
Paul?
Hi, Tom. Thanks very much for the presentation. Just one question, as far as the cost associated with out-of-district students, how do you establish that?
Yes, that is not a local decision. It's calculated by the Department of Education. They don't just throw a dart against the wall. They do have a formula that considers what our foundation budget per pupil is. And the last I checked, there's a cap. So if you were to go onto the DESE website and look at South Shore and look at our foundation budget, the bare minimum that the state expects to spend on education, you would take a number, you'd divide it by the 599 kids in the building, and you'd come up with a per pupil foundation budget number. Now that number is inflated for non-resident tuition purposes. I could definitely get you a link for the calculation, but it's something that we don't control from year to year, and it does vary based on some particular parts of the formula. Over the years, I've asked as well, you know, hey, could you unpack this number for me? Sometimes there's a wide variance, maybe could be $1,000 per student, but the factors are basically every spring we get we would get a number for the following year, and it's derived from the foundation budget formula that the state puts out.
I think just real quick, I think Jim is holding up a document that helps with that. For anyone.
Sorry, Jim, I can't see you on the screen here. Oh, thank you, Jim. Jim has a list of...
Tom, maybe if you stop sharing for a second, Jim's could...
Too much
sharing. He pulled it down already, so no worries.
All right, Jim, you got a bigger rectangle there. Jim's got a report of all the non-res numbers for the vocational schools. Jim, could you unmute and just mention what that is again, please?
Yep.
Yeah, this is the sheet we get as part of the end of the year that the state gives us for, again, vocational tuition rates. They give us a sheet with all the vocational towns, all the vocational schools, and here it is. This is what you can charge your out-of-district students and so forth. And I guess, you know, as Tom mentioned before, that we still have interest from out-of-district towns, but, you know, because we're committed to the 8 communities as part of our community, they get first dibs on the seats in the freshman class. And what has happened is that the spike in interest throughout our member towns, there's no seats for out-of-district students. In fact, I don't think that the last 2 freshman classes that were all in district towns. There are opportunities for out-of-district kids to join the school sophomore year if there's an opening in a class. And I know our admissions guidance department, Amy Dow, is constantly getting inquiries from other towns as far as joining, coming in and joining our enrollments and so forth. But again, right now we're committed to the 8 towns, and that's why those numbers keep dropping. So,
and we would anticipate that's going to continue with the admissions process we're through right now, based on what we're seeing for application interest, and we will come back to you in a year with a similar story of that non-resident number dropping even further, and within 2 years probably have a single digit. And that's what Jim said earlier, maybe some kids joining from out of the district in sophomore year or above in a vocational program that has capacity.
And what's the size of each class?
Paul, so each class, and we admit a class around 170. If I have a higher attrition rate, if I have smaller junior and senior classes, sometimes I could admit as high as 180. But if I were to average it for you, I would tell you 170 per year. We typically are graduating classes of high 140s, early 150s.
That the add renovate that project, is that looking to increase any capacity, or is that just trying to maintain what you have?
I think and hope. I know the MSBA has a formula of how much they're going to reimburse, but goodness gracious, the kids who are here now need more 21st century space, but there is a clear demand. We need a bigger school. We've got to have some smart designs on how to make creative use of more space. I need to be able to say to kids who get into our school that there's enough space for you to enroll in the major that you want. And I have in the past talked to you about electrical. This year is no different. I'm going to get this wrong, but we had 38 freshmen want electrical, and I pushed to make sure to fit 20. So we're telling dozens of kids every year in several programs that we don't have the space internally to have the major. And we have a scoring system that's very transparent, but I would love to be able to alleviate some of those stories. Very targeted. Where is the demand? Where is the labor demand? We don't need to increase every program an equal amount of square feet, but we should be responsive to student interest and are the jobs out there. And that's my hope, that we can get into those conversations, that as part of an ad reno, we could strategically put classrooms and shops that don't have heavy equipment or need high ceilings. We could put them strategically in one area of the building and open up some of our first floor space for more space for programming that has large equipment and heavier student interest.
Right. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Matt. I'd be happy to answer any other questions.
Barbara?
Hi, Barbara.
Hi, Tom. How are you?
Hi. Good to see you. How you doing?
Good to see you. Good. Just because we do have some newer members, I just wanted to get the overall of how, so there's a certain number of towns that once they agree to your budget, the budget passes.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you for asking that.
So if you could just go over that, and then there are certain things that that you guys do that require all 8 towns to agree.
Yes. So in terms of the budget, a regional school budget would require 2/3. So that would be 6 out of our 8 communities. So if we secure 6 affirmative votes, then that obligates all eight communities to pay the assessment. What we'll do, and I'll just extend that a little bit, Barbara, just in terms of a timeline. So we're obligated to certify our budget 45 days before our earliest town meetings. And I give you all, you're the ones going to do all the hard work to get an April 4th town meeting and recommendations. I do not envy your Zoom fatigue in the next 6 weeks, but we know Abington is at least penciled in for the 4th and Situate's penciled in for the 11th. So February is typically our time where we certify the budget. Now, the way the rules work is once a regional school committee certifies its budget, it can reduce the numbers. It just can't go back and say, whoops, we forgot a bus. We got to go back and add. So certifying means we've created a ceiling for those expenses, but a 2/3 vote is what we need. An example of something we would that we would need for a unanimous vote would be what we did last spring, which was a debt authorization. We went to all 8 of our communities. We explained what we needed to do. We weren't having any luck with MSBA, and that's where, in terms of the incurring of debt, that was an example just from last spring.
Perfect, Tom. Just for informational purposes, I wanted to make sure that we had that. Thank you.
And for any new members, I'd extend an invitation, not that you'll have any time between now and, I don't know, the end of town meeting or May, but there's an open invitation. If you've not been to the school and you'd like to see the insides and our operation, please don't hesitate to reach out to me.
Any other questions?
And Tom, I am gonna take you up on that. I've never been to the school, so I'd love to check it out. So.
Fantastic. Shoot me an email, thickey@ssvotech.org. Happy to set something up.
Awesome. Thank you.
Definitely stop at the restaurant.
Yes, absolutely. So we'll have to not come on a Monday, but Tuesday through Friday, absolutely right. Good move.
Right. All right, no more questions.
One comment before we head off. Again, last year during our debt authorization process and so forth, I just want to thank again Sonia for all of her help. I met with her a couple times to go over the process. You guys had just done the high school building. We're new at this. I'm new at this. So she was very helpful in helping us with, bonding questions and legal questions. Comes to find out we're using the same bonding agent and so forth. But yeah, she was very helpful, and Abington's got a great person in the finance director. So
we definitely agree there, Jim.
Thanks,
we
Jim.
Feel very blessed to have Sonia on our team. So, Tom, just real quick before you do end, if you could go back at the very beginning, you were talking about positions you were looking to either add or change.
Yes.
If you could just touch a little bit more detail on that one, because it was
Absolutely
quick and I kind of missed it in my notes.
No, that's okay. I had mentioned that.
I got those.
Yeah. So we have two vocational programs, electrical and our horticulture landscape program, where I have funds for technical aids. And so part of what I want to do is upgrade those positions into teaching positions. This is going to allow our horticulture landscape program to expand its off-campus footprint. I have visions of having this program doing some supportive municipal work, maybe work with veterans agents. There's a lot that those kids can learn from customer service and as well as technical skills and equipment use. And I'd like to have them start to do that off campus, and a third teacher is going to allow us to do that. There's also funds in the budget for some operational support, a little bit of cafeteria support, adding a few hours to a custodial position. I need to add a custodial position because quite honestly, we need the additional support in the building, but I also need someone in the bullpen to support transportation. As I mentioned earlier, they're also licensed, and we've seen a huge increase in support for some of our athletic programs. So I've got a couple of assistant coaching positions in there, and I'm also trying to phase on a social worker position as well. So there's some funds that I'm going to match with some federal grant money to bring a social worker position onto the budget.
Those sound great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone have any overall questions for Tom or Jim or Tom? Anything else you want to know before we finalize things with them?
You mentioned federal grant money, so I'm assuming did the vocational school get COVID relief funding and ARPA funding and all that as a local school districts did?
Yes, and kudos to Jim and his counterparts in our 8 communities. The Plymouth County reimbursement program was that was a lot of paperwork, but that certainly was something that we were able to take advantage of, as well as we're also eligible for ESSER funds as well.
Thank you.
Rams, Bengals? No. That's not on the agenda. Please. No, sorry.
I think your first namesake Tom Brady retiring is a little more dominating our news right now.
Understood. I'm hurt. He didn't mention me. Okay. Well, thanks again, Matt. Thank you all.
Thank you guys. Thank you, the three of you and everybody on your teams for all of the work they do. You guys always come very prepared. A lot of good information for us.
Yes, thank you very much for your time.
You're
Much
very
appreciated.
Much appreciated.
Have a good night.
Have a good
Take
night.
care now.
All right. And that brings us to, go back to my agenda. That brings us to our inspection services, which is previously been separated out to the building department and the Board of Health and that kind of stuff, but it is combined over the last year and lost heads of both departments. So it falls to Scott to manage everything, and Scott and Sonia to present these budgets to us. I know you guys, Sonia, you emailed out some documents to us. Is there anything specific you want me to start with sharing?
Well, if you want to start with the 2410, the building department, it's still titled inspectional services, but I think with Marty's unfortunate departure, we're going to revert back to separate building and health departments. At least that's what Scott's been planning. So that's what we're planning on now, unless that were to change. But for now, we'll be keeping them separate. So we'll change this name back to building department. So Scott and I will be kind of taking turns tonight, I think.
Yeah, it's been interesting to kind of I had to dissect it and try to make heads or tails of what's been going on over the past couple of years. And I think if you remember correctly, was it last year that we actually rolled the other inspectors was stuff that was in our sort of a revolving fund within. So we sort of put all of that into the building department budget, makes it look like it grew when in fact it didn't grow.
Yes. Yeah, there was there was sort of a operational change where we were taking care of things in a revolving fund, and we moved more of that into the so that the newer members and anybody listening can follow along. There were a lot of things like gas inspection services and things that we pull in outside contractors for, outside inspectors for, that worked with the building inspector in town. There was a revolving fund that the fees would go into the revolving fund, and that would pay for the inspectors that had to come out. There was a lot of question as to whether or not that was the right way to be handling that. And we moved it into the budget to try and have it a little bit more, Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, but have it a little bit more transparent, a little bit more controlled, a little bit better able to predict what we were going to be doing there.
Originally, when that was done, I believe we were told that it was almost incentivized the two inspectors, gas and electrical, maybe a plumbing and electrical.
Plumbing, I think.
Yeah, it was an incentive to get more inspections done because they were paid accordingly.
Yeah, it was probably a good theory. I don't know of any other department that I've ever dealt with I've seen a lot of them. They never did it that way. It's an interesting model, but there was a lot
I think
of
it was, we were having trouble holding on to those inspectors, and at times they were only part-time, or we were sharing them. But now it's a lot more streamlined.
Yep.
Yeah, it's better. The money all comes in. The money all goes into the general fund, and it's like every other operating budget within the town. It's very clear, as you can see, as all the salaries are there. That includes the wiring inspector, the local building inspector, the zoning inspector, the plumbing gas inspector. So they're all included in that, and an administrative assistant is in that budget also, which is a full-time position. as we go down the line, I'm not really
Scott,
sure.
you're kind of muffled sounding. I don't know if.
Thank God, I thought it was my hearing.
Is that any better?
That's better.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, my microphone slipped under my shirt. Okay.
The joys of Zoom.
Right. At least the cat didn't take it.
Remember, that's your coworker.
All
All right,
so again, what I was saying
Yep.
is all within the salary section, we do have all the inspectors are in there now and one administrative assistant. Sonia, the other compensation, do you remember what that one was?
That's for emergency inspections.
Right. So occasionally if we have a fire over, actually we had an incident the other night over at 10 Railroad with sprinkler lines broke. We have to call somebody in. The local building inspector gets called in. The wiring inspector gets called in. So it's typically an overtime pay or something like that to just cover that.
So real quick, back to the salary line. We're looking at a projected increase of $24,000. Is that for? Are we expecting additional inspection, so we need more use of the people that we have, or is that additional person or half a person essentially?
I would expect by July 1 to actually have a full-time certified building commissioner to run that department. So that reflects that salary. However that shakes out, but that's why it's in there. So that would fund that person, whoever it may be, to be who's a fully certified person, and then there would also still be a local inspector in there in some capacity.
Perfect. Thank you.
Mileage stipend is obviously we reimburse them for using their vehicles. We no longer have a dedicated vehicle specifically for the building commissioner.
Scott, so there isn't is there a reason you're getting away from that, or just the car broke down and that was what the previous employee agreed to?
So the previous employee who's no longer with us, when he left, we basically scrapped the vehicle. It was not a very safe vehicle. And then we just decided to go with the stipend method. We do have another vehicle that was being used over the health department. It was purchased with money through the CARES Act, but that vehicle was specifically and still is specifically being used for 99% of COVID-related services. So there will not be, and there's no intention right now to purchase another vehicle for this new building commissioner. We'll continue to use the stipend, mileage stipend reimbursement.
Right. I just didn't know if we did have one, it might be appealing to an applicant to not be using their own vehicle, but I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, we don't, and although we have had some talks, and I've had some interesting conversations with some considering some grant opportunities out there for electric vehicles. So there's always a possibility if something came up, but right now we're just going to go status quo with this plan.
All right, thanks.
And Scott, is that stipend intended for one person, one position?
There's I think out of this one, it is probably 3, Sonia. Does that sound right?
Yeah, there's a few people that would be included in this. All of the inspectors, wiring, plumbing and gas, as well as the building inspector and the building commissioner. So there would be multiple people in this line item.
it's kind of difficult right now because what I've asked them to do several times is just sort of track their mileage and report back to me so we can make sure that we're, you know, that we're taking care of them properly and covering them or reimbursing them properly. Because right now it's just sort of a flat rate that's been split between them.
Okay.
Obviously, the education and training speaks for itself. There is requirements for each one of the inspectors to have continuing education. You know, it's one thing that you know, I know most of the departments reduced their budgets or just didn't use it over the last couple of years. But hopefully, everybody's kept up and will start, you know, getting caught back up. It's a very important part of all of our positions is that we, you know, keep up with the current rules, regulations, laws. Any of their licenses are predicated upon also.
I think we're losing your mic again, Scott. Sorry about that.
I probably dig up my other piece of new fancy beat.
Always fun. Getting used to the new things.
Let's see. The other technical budget, the reason there's a big reduction on that basically covers the cost of code books.
Sorry, still in and out. Covers the cost of what?
That covers the cost of the code book.
Or it's a series of code books. It's probably 14 different things.
So if Barbara, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, or Scott or Sonia, but is this something that's kind of cyclical once every few years?
Yeah.
Though there's a higher cost on this one.
Correct.
Yep.
And it updates, they update all the volumes. In this particular case, when I updated my certifications, I actually received an online update. So we're good for at least another year.
Good.
Postage budget. Not really sure why we went up on that one. You know, so is there a reason to incorporate something into that?
I didn't have any notes about why the postage went up, so I'm not positive.
Yeah, we'll take another look at that one, but it might have been something that we thought should have been put into that budget, but we'll definitely take another look. The printing budget obviously we reduced because they're just not doing a lot of printing.
Yep. Good.
Office supplies is pretty much flat. The photocopier, it's a contractual agreement that they have. It's probably another 2 years on that. Okay. The wide format scanner printer, again, it's contractual agreement. They use that not only to print large sets of plans, but they also scan paper documents that come in and paper plans. They scan them in hopes of never having to pay for paper copies. Right now, they, if I'm not mistaken, they still are doing both.
I know. I remember. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Matt.
I remember talking with the previous commissioner about the project that they were working on to scan all of the old records and all of the old documents. And I know this with the wide format scanner was part of it because like blueprints and things are big. How has that project been going or has gone? I know it was well underway.
Yeah, it's ongoing. You know, it's sometimes it's like shoveling against the tide, though, because the plans are coming in as fast as, you know, at that time it was the admin that was doing that work was part-time and was mostly just to do that. It's just like he's a full-time admin and doing a lot more work, but not necessarily more scanning. the hope is with our new online programming,
Can't hear you, Scott. Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go and plug this in upstairs. I'll be right back. Sonia, if you could just jump on for a second.
Yep, sure.
Thanks, Scott. Sorry.
Do you want to move on and then he can finish what he was saying about the scanning?
Yeah, real quick though, Drew had something.
I was
that
just curious.
jumped
So
in
is that an actual scanner, or is that the cost associated with employees scanning, or like an overtime project, or?
No, that's the actual scanner printer that we have. It's a lease right now, so we budget for the lease itself plus any unknown repairs that might pop up during the year.
Gotcha, because it just seemed like it was a big jump there where it was nothing, and then it went up to like almost 13 grand, and now it's back down to 3. So
In our meeting with Marty, no one could figure out where the $12,000 number came from.
okay.
I know they were having a huge problem with storage prior
Okay.
to having the scanner.
Oh, okay, that
Yeah,
might have come into play.
I will when I can get at my physical notebook that has my notes from last year, I'll go back and look. I think that they were looking to add essentially time for people to do the scanning on the project, since we had
Oh.
the scanner now, but that might not have been the case.
Oh, okay.
All right, I'm back, guys. Can you hear me now?
Hey, that's
Much
much better.
better.
Scott.
Perfect.
Okay. So the beats just aren't going to work.
Gotta
Yeah.
take it up
So
with Dr. Dre.
yeah. So what I was saying was, I expect that what's going to happen is we're converting to the ability for online, so developers or builders can submit all their plans and applications through an online portal. Most towns have done that already, and they're actually almost all using the same software. So most contractors are used to doing it now. And what this does is it'll relieve a lot of the incoming paperwork. So we'll probably be able to continue to catch up. But one thing that we don't have in town hall is an archive. There's a lot of closets that are full of stuff. There was a lot of stuff at Bank Street. We sold it. We moved that a lot of those papers and archives over to one of the schools at North or Center. And for temporary storage, we went through, destroyed what we didn't have to keep. But we're kind of looking, and we'll probably bring this up later in our discussions next month or so, using some of the opera money to do some sort of a storage area up in town hall that we can also use for archives until we have a more permanent solution. Because they literally have stuff tucked in every nook and cranny. So major design flaw. Remember that when you're building a town hall, is have a place to put the archive.
Scott, does the town have a records retention policy so we know what we have to keep and for how long?
Yep. Of course, yeah. And we follow the state guidelines on that. As a matter of fact, I don't know how many, that's kind of one thing that they recently did is when we, sold Bank Street, is everybody went down there who had stuff there. They checked what was there and checked it against the record retention guidelines and, decided what could finally be thrown away and what couldn't. Most people like myself, I typically, when I do large bid documents and stuff, I have boxes that I just date when I'm done. And it says, I have one on the desk now. It says you can destroy this in like 2028. So that means it needs a home for a while.
And would any of these documents have any PII,
Any what?
personal information?
No.
Nothing that's confidential.
No.
I'm not sure what that means. Nothing that's like it's either
Well, like personally.
Personally
So
ident-
she's saying it's not personally identifiable. I
Right,
believe
like
is what Sonia's saying.
a commitment book obviously is going to have people's names and addresses on it, but that's public record.
Right.
But in terms of the, like health insurance information, we do need to maintain some records for a certain amount of time, but that's kept in our office. But nothing with like social security numbers would be unlocked at any time. So, we do have to keep things for a period, but then once we're able to destroy them and we get permission from the state to do so, then those types of documents will be shredded.
Yeah, they
Okay.
go to a company that does
Mhm.
the shredding for us.
Right.
They could come down on the big truck.
Mhm.
Okay. Thank you.
And you could, also potentially store off-site with like an Iron Mountain or something like that, and then just recall and shred as needed.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, so let's see, that's photocopy of Wyoming.
So
We
inspection.
zeroed out, we zeroed out the gas and oil budget when we got rid of the Explorer.
Yep.
And vehicle supply budget, obviously, we zeroed out when we got rid of the Explorer. And you just have basic supplies, travel again. It's, we expect these guys to go to meetings and conferences, and that's how we would reimburse them. Dues and
I'll
fees.
note actually, Scott, just if I can jump in, that travel line, the decrease is because some of the mileage stipends have been paid out of this account. But we really need to run those through payroll in order to be totally compliant. So that's why you see this jump where it looks like it's been used. It's just kind of shifting to another account.
Which account was that shifting to, Sonia?
The mileage stipends account. And so
Okay.
now this account will be consistent with other town departments where it's just for travel, for trainings and that kind of thing.
Perfect. Thank you.
Dues and fees, again, all the inspectors have associations that they're members of and or licenses that are required that we may reimburse them for. And then the expenses would be all other expenses.
All $250.
All 250 of anything that we didn't think of.
Yep.
So out of curiosity, of the total operating budget for, it was what, 276, how much of that is recuperated, or how much of that, is self-funded through things like permit fees and, other expenses that the department takes in, or revenue the department takes in?
That's a good question. I don't have their revenue number. I didn't bring that with me, but they have been tracking it. I'll send you guys that separately, exactly. Because I did mean to bring it. Unless you have it, Sonia.
I don't.
Okay, because I'm assuming it's probably substantial when you consider all the fees. You want to put in a new dishwasher, it's $60, and gas and electric for the permits. So
yeah, it is going to be it's a good amount of money. And one thing that I was told that the guys, the admins are tracking it, said that we're up about 25% over this time from last year. So that's kind of nice to see, or nice to hear.
And that, Scott, right, correct me if I'm wrong, was the money that was going into the revolving fund before.
There was a percentage of it. I think you had
a percentage of those fees. Yeah. And was it like 60% 60, or something 40 like maybe? That?
Yeah.
So
it's nice because it's 100% going into the general fund, and it just makes it to me, it makes more sense. I'm not really sure why do it any other way. It seems more complicated. So I'm happy we've got it this way now.
Anyone have other questions on the building department? All right. Where to next? Waste, Board of Health, Public Health.
Whatever comes up first.
Yeah, waste would be next.
All right. Okay, can everyone see the waste budget now? I think that should be.
Yes,
there.
I can see it.
Okay, good.
Okay, so we took the salaries out of this and we transferred the salary to health, right?
Right.
Makes sense.
Yes.
Because it was a function of one of the admins and or the health inspector to deal with, the phone calls, the scheduling, and any issues with waste collection. But it just seemed to make more sense because it was that person who was dealing with it or within that budget. So we moved that. That's why that zeroed out. Your next item there, the purchase services, that's our contractual obligation. Yeah. And that it's based on tipping fees. So these are this is looking at what the tonnage is and what the hauling has been to this point so far. And then, Sonia projecting that forward to our best guess of what it's going to actually cost next year.
Can you remind me what the tipping fees are currently for trash and the fees for recycle?
No, but I'll get it for you.
Okay.
I don't have it. I just, I don't have it.
I know it was costing us more for recycle.
Yeah, well,
Barbara's just trying to get Greg going.
it certainly hasn't. It certainly isn't like it used to be, where recycle was actually paying in offsetting the costs of the other.
Yeah, it was.
I think they're both probably around $90 or something like that now.
And then the trash is so much per ton and the recycle is so much per ton. Do you happen to know those numbers?
Yeah, no, but I will get them. I do have them handy
That's
somewhere.
fine. Yeah, absolutely. And we're in the first year of a 3-year contract with this company, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and so far I've been told that they've been performing very well.
I'm happy with them.
Yeah, most people are. I haven't heard the complaints or seen the complaints or had the problems that we were having with the previous company. So I'm happy about that. But the amount that they're pulling in hauling, it's in the amount that it's going up every year is far exceeding our ability to keep it in this budget. I've said it many times that it's just growing and growing.
I find it the 1,350 makes sense. I'm not questioning that, but any idea why we budgeted so much less last year?
No.
Yeah, I don't remember.
Kind of been wondering the same thing, and I don't know if it was because it was the first year of the contract, and
that's what I remember.
Yeah, but at the same time, we had projections from the year before. The amount of the that he was charging was going to be less, but I seem to have recalled it that we were going to be closer to 1.2 last year. So I'm not sure why we reduced it to 1.1 at this point. I just don't remember. And I could reach out to Sue and see if she remembers, but she's pretty busy these days too.
From what I remember, I think that we were expecting to get, it was going to be less going with the new company.
We certainly did get much better rates with the new company. And that was the first year of the contract. So, but yeah, I'm not really sure why we had, I could be quite honest with you, I think it was close to 1.2. So I'm not sure why we put it in at 1.4. And, we've been having that conversation a bit lately because it's, concerning to us too.
Don't research it on my account by any means. It was just an observation.
But what we've done is we've looked at, like we said, what what the billing has been to date coming from this new company. And so we have a good, we have a good amount of statistics used to kind of project next year with a increase in the tipping fee. So that's how we came up with the 1.35.
So we'll be monitoring this year's numbers, obviously, and we probably we're going to need some sort of a transfer at the end of the year. So we'll be paying close attention to this one.
Yeah, maybe we just stop trash collection at the end of the year.
I'm sure that won't cause any complaints.
I know. Somebody edit that part of the.
I think we can just label it right here as that was sarcasm.
Okay. The carts, obviously, those are the buckets. The buckets that you put out in front of your house, and we have to replace them from time to time. I don't know whether there was a thought that we were going to have more this year than last year. This was what Marty had recommended, so we want to be cautious and try and stick with that number.
I believe there was a thought that because of how many years ago we purchased them, there was a thought that the number that we're going to need to be replaced was going to start to go up on a more significant scale.
Yeah, I think it's like anything else. It has a life cycle.
Yep.
You can see there was a note in there as far as why we dropped the
compost site.
Compost, yeah.
I'm going to highlight that.
Yeah, Marty recommended that we just weren't going to need it this year.
And that was for the grinding of the compost site.
There we go. Highlighted.
Nice.
Sharps disposal.
It's been. I'm guessing the reason why we haven't used much of it is because they're being mixed in with sharps that are being disposed of and covered by CARES Act, and
that was going to be my guess.
But when that money and the CARES Act money is pretty much done, so those numbers might start coming up again. And I believe it's a contractual amount that we have with, I want to say, Stericycle or one of those companies.
Okay.
Hazardous waste disposal.
I have a note that we're getting a grant to help with this.
Grants are good.
Yeah.
We like grants.
Yeah.
And again, the dues and fees, the same.
What do we pay dues for this?
South Shore Recycling Co-op is the primary one. That might be the only one, actually.
Yeah, and they deal with, like, when you see the hazardous waste days, those things. They put those on with us, and they also help us find pricing on different things. So they do like competitive bid pricing on stuff. They were actually talking at one point, they were going to try and do a regionalized, I think, trash collection. It just wasn't any interest in it from enough communities.
That's the end of waste collection.
That's it for waste.
Anybody have waste collection questions? Not.
Sorry, Matt. It took me a second to get off mute.
I was going to say, are we going to get through this without a peep from Greg?
Yeah. I mean, are other towns not having like the same issues? Is that what you said?
I never said that.
That's what I'm saying. Can you repeat what you said?
I said there was one at one point when we were getting ready to go out to bid that I thought SERG was going to try and get a regional contract, but it never happened, and I don't know why they didn't find interest in it, or for whatever reason it didn't happen. I'm not that active with SERG. They sort of do their own thing. So
Sure.
I did tell Marty that if it was something that was going to take some legs to, keep up on it, and I'd be happy to, put our 2 cents in or get involved if we could, especially if it could save us money, but it just never took any legs.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else? All right. Should I move to Board of Health next?
Yep.
All right. There we go. Everyone see the Board of Health now? Take silence as a yes.
Yes, Matt.
Thanks.
I see it. So Board of Health salaries, that is, we know, we have the acting health director, who was formerly the assistant health coordinator, his salary, and then administrative staff. And Sonia, do we have one full-time and one part-time in that?
This 181 figure, this is including the acting health agent, and I've got a full-time admin support in here as a placeholder. I know Scott is still working with the health and the building staff to kind of see how we can work it out so that the health department has the administrative support that they need. And Scott, I apologize. I had every intention of removing the nurse's salary from here, like we had talked about, and I did not pull that out. So if I do pull that out, the figure would actually decrease to 103,921.
And where would the nurse's salary go?
Well, right now we're planning on having the nurse's salary being paid from a grant. There's a regional public health grant that we're getting. We're not sure if we can charge her salary to that. If we can't, we've been discussing using ARPA funds, since it is, a COVID response expense. So that's what we're talking about now. And Scott did ask me to remove that, and I removed it from the public health nursing account, but not this one where it had originally been budgeted. So my apologies for that.
But we wouldn't be getting rid of the public health nurse.
No, we are keeping the nurse.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, it's just, that's what the grant funds that we have.
Right.
Were designed for, and those funds will run us another 2 to 3 years and possibly longer. Plus the other grant is a longer term grant than that. So it seems it's appropriate that's how we pay.
Right. Yeah, it makes sense. I just wanted to make sure that I was clear on that.
Yeah. So the staffing won't change in that, is that we still have a fully dedicated public health nurse. She's working, I can't even tell you how many hours a week she works. And I say that because she works a lot, not because I don't know. Well into over 40 hours, and
certainly worth our weight in gold, especially right
yes.
now in the past couple of, absolutely. Yeah.
So that, and then obviously, we have the acting health agent is also full-time, and then we have some administrative staff that we're just trying to work out, because now that we're no longer inspectional services and joint staff, that we just have to figure out how to appropriately support the health department.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Can I just ask, on as far as that grant goes, is it specific to covering salary, or can you do other things with that grant money?
It was not specific to covering salary. No, it was, in fact, the ARPA grant that money is not specific to salaries. The other grant that's coming in is also not specific. It's for a lot of support services, and we're actually looking into that more to see exactly what other things we can use it for. I actually have to bring there'll be a grant administrator that hasn't been onboarded yet. It's a grant that is the multi-jurisdictional grant. It's I want to say Brockton, Whitman, East Bridgewater, Abington. We're the host community of it. So we'll have we'll host the grant administrator. All the expenses out of that will also come out of the grant, and any associated expenses or expenses, a percentage of the costs will be reimbursed to our town. So any shared expenses like you would have with any enterprise account type of thing, we would benefit from that. So we're not really, we're not 100% sure on where that's going as far as other services, but we do think that the idea of that was to help backfill and support health department staffs. So, currently, if we were to be backlogged, if we were to have some issues with during times when we should be doing food inspections, we would be able to bring in food inspectors, and they would be paid, whether they be subcontractors or whatnot, or a regional one that would come and do restaurant inspections for the health departments, or housing inspections, or come summertime, if you have commercial pool, swimming pool inspections, things like that. So it's a very large grant for a lot of different support services, and we're feeling that the public health nurse is one of those.
But without this grant money, would we still have this nurse?
If there was, right at this point in time, so prior to this, what we were doing is we had a company, and it happened to all towns right around the same time. It was just around the time that I got here. All boards of health had partnered with Partners Insurance, almost did all of them, or Partners Healthcare rather, and they provided public health nurse duties to municipalities. And for the most part, what they did is they came out on occasion to assist us with flu clinics, obviously once a year. And then if there was an outbreak, if there was a series of food poisonings or mysterious illnesses or whatever, they get reported to the state. Somebody, for instance, if you were to get sick tonight after eating something and you went to your doctor and the doctor said, well, this is kind of unusual, and he would report it onto the state, and the public health nurse monitors that for us. And occasionally, if there's something that we have to know about it, she would reach out and say, hey, look, we've got like 8 people that had, raw oysters down at Lucy's that don't feel well. You might want to go check on that. So for the most part, that kind of service was minimal. And that's when you needed a public health nurse. But then you throw a pandemic in it, and all of a sudden you need a public health nurse that nobody was providing. So I guess the short story is right now, yeah, we're going to need it for the foreseeable future as a full-time position. Is it always going to be a full-time position? I don't think so. But like I said, right now it is.
So I guess, is this a priority for the town? Like, I'm just trying to, do we typically pay operational expenses out of grant money? Because at some point that grant money goes away, you have to make a decision. Is this position really required? So yeah. What's the philosophy as far as the priorities for the town to make those decisions?
We absolutely, in my opinion, we absolutely need this person now. And we're absolutely going to need this person into the next, couple of years, probably. So we have grant money that's been put to us specifically to cover these expenses. I think we should use it. Then, yeah, there's going to be decisions that we're going to have to make in the future.
And the position also helps with the a lot with the is very helpful to the seniors and the schools, I believe. And when things like this particular pandemic, things like that come up, if you don't have that position, you're scrambling.
Yeah.
So to Paul's point and to his question, I can relate. When I first came on the committee, we were working through grant money that was paying for essentially a couple of firefighter paramedic positions that were at the time in the ambulance budget, which has since been merged into the fire department budget. And the fire department at that time, when we were building back up from the 2008 crash, they used that grant money to be able to get staffing back up to support 6-person shifts. And it was with the knowledge that when that grant ran out, we were going to have to either reduce the staffing or figure out the ability to pay for that from the general budget. So I think Scott, if I'm hearing you correctly on the public health nurse position, this is a thing where it's something that we need right now. We're looking for the grant to pay for it right now, or the ARPA funds to pay for it right now. And at the time that grant runs out, we'll have to make a decision.
Yeah, and I think we have, I think there's two things. One, we have the time to thoughtfully make the decision and plan for it. That if there are other programs or programs that are going to be continuing beyond 2 years out, then we want to start making sure that we're preparing to fill this budget appropriately when that time comes. And the other part of it is, I think the other difference with it is, I mean, you had to make a commitment when you hired those firefighters that you would fund them. That was part of that grant, and that's not part of what we're doing here. But I do think that in my opinion, that we've seen some real big benefits to having a full-time public health nurse beyond our COVID issues. So it is quite possibly something, they've talked about programs where, they're instructed or able to instruct in, CPR and basic, I guess just very basic first aid, and they can provide training for babysitting classes where the kids can learn how to do that and teach those things. So there's a lot of different things that that we could have if we had a public health nurse, and what they do with the seniors and go down and check on the seniors and down at the senior center and blood pressure checks and just generally seeing how they are. I think it's a great service that in my opinion, it may be something that as things wind down with the pandemic, we may be looking to do more. But right now, I think we have to take the opportunity that we have, take advantage of the grant that we have.
But we're taking advantage of it to cover operational costs. If we think that nurse is a public health nurse is a priority, because there are other programs or priorities that the town, whether it's around substance abuse, mental health, that they could be trying to address and using some of the funds for that.
I'll tell you, that's probably something that would be addressed through this public health nurse also,
right?
For sure. So again, I understand what you're saying. I think those probably would not necessarily fit specifically into the grant in the ARPA funds, but the public health nurse would, and she does have the ability to offer help in those other services, and a willingness to do so, which I find very refreshing. But Yeah, I agree. I mean, there's definitely some decisions that we're going to have to make, and we certainly could put it back into the budget. And when we may have to or may want to in the near future.
Okay, thank you.
No, it's a good discussion. I appreciate it. So,
Oh, sorry, Scott, can I
Okay,
just
yeah.
circle back on the salary? So, you indicated that the reduction for the next fiscal year is due to the departure of the director. And then we're moving another 74,000 out of that into the public nurse account, which is going to be grant funded. So are you retaining any funding in there? Are you is there an anticipation that you'll be hiring a new person to head that department, or are we just kind of seeing how it goes and that's not going to be budgeted for? Or
Yeah, I think that between the public health nurse and moving the, using the acting, I think we'll see how that works. But I certainly think, when I started I guess it was 2 years ago, that the staff of that department was a full-time health inspector and a part-time administrative assistant that was dealing mostly with the waste issues, and a full-time administrative assistant that dealt with people and obviously paperwork and those things. That's how everything was pre-pandemic, and at that time was when partners said, hey, look, we're not going to help you with your public health nurse. And we said, okay, well, that's not a lot unless there's a pandemic, but we'll deal with that. And then we said, okay, well, let's bring in some more help. So I think that we're going to be okay. I think we're still better staffed than we were 2 years ago. So I'm fairly confident that with this budget, we'll be all right.
okay, thank you.
The Rabies Clinic. Marty,
that's a budget buster right there.
all right, I know Marty said we should do it. So let's.
Maybe we could have like a fun run 5K to fund that for any fans of The Office out there.
It's important. But apparently advertising isn't, so.
No advertising this
There'll
year.
be no advertising. Let's see. Postage, we just remained flat. And printing, I think that they've been probably, I think the recommendation on that was to bring it up mostly because of different things that to do with information out there, whether it be testing, flu clinics, whatever. I think probably most of his expenses last year that were related to that would have been covered by the CARES Act.
If I remember correctly, I think there was also a discussion of combining the advertising and printing because they were so similar in, the function that they were actually, it was hard to determine which account to use for those.
Office supplies, just general basic. The vaccines, I think I'll let Sonia explain the whole vaccine issue.
Yeah, so this is a new account that we just created today, actually. We found that when we were purchasing vaccines, it wasn't being posted to a consistent account. So we wanted to have a separate place where we could post these. Now, these are all flu clinic vaccines right here. This is what we're expecting to pay next year based on the order that our nurse has already put into place for the fall clinics. These vaccines also get reimbursed, and we have a general fund revenue account where those payments come in, but because it's not necessarily a one-to-one payment or receipt and then expense, we needed to have it in, set up this way. So we'll have a separate expense account, separate revenue account, and we've been having deposits coming in just about every month to reimburse for the flu shots that were given this year. There's also another grant that we get for flu clinics, and we get about $2,500 to $3,000 that's posted to a different fund, and that's specifically for the administration of the flu vaccines clinics. So syringes, disposal, that kind of thing can all be posted to there, including temporary help if we need to hire people for a few hours to man those clinics. So for next year, she was able to order significantly more vaccine than we've had in the previous couple of years because the demand has been so great. She said even with this level of vaccine, she believes we'll still run out and won't be able to give shots to everybody who needs one. So it's great that we're able to provide that service to our town.
Sonia, do you know an approximate number of how many vaccines?
Well, she said it's roughly $30 a shot. So that would be about 325 doses, it sounds like.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. So that's not a perfect number, I'm sure, but that should be rough.
I was just looking for a general. That's perfect. Thank you.
Sorry, scrolling now. Travel.
Yeah, travel was obviously reduced. We actually sat down with the public health nurse and with the acting health director just to kind of get a gauge from them and what they thought would be appropriate for keeping up any licenses, getting any licenses that they may need, or they felt that this was fine. Same thing with dues. We discussed it with them, anything that would be required to make sure that they was enough in the budget to cover it.
Do we not need as much training this year because of the training we got in the current year, or is that an ARPA thing? Or
no, again, it was with the discussion with the two individuals on what they thought was going to be appropriate to cover whatever meetings or whatever conferences or whatever it was that they went to. I think there was something fairly large that they were anticipating 2022, and I'm not sure what it was.
I don't recall either.
I think that's it for Board of Health. Anyone with questions there? All right, I think public health nurse. I think we've had a pretty good discussion on this one already. That got zeroed. I think that's the only thing there. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and again, it should not, obviously that number doesn't, it's not a reflection of whether we think it's important or not, because we think it's very important.
Do we have any other budgets or areas we gotta go to for this? Sorry, Paul, back to
Can
you.
I just, I should have asked this before, Scott, but in a earlier meeting, I don't know, it was like in December, whatever, we would talk about waste collection. You talked about possibly going to a fee system for trash removal, waste collection. Is that still a discussion point, or has that been tabled for the time being?
No, it's still a discussion point, and it comes up, if we don't continue on with the discussion, then I'm going to bring it up again next year when we're doing the budget again, because my overall concern is just that it should come out of the budget altogether, and it would require us to do some sort of a rollback. Obviously we wouldn't just start charging people we would have to roll back. There were two overrides done in Matt or Barbara. I'm sure you guys probably have.
Yeah, like 1.6. Then the town, the community feels very strongly about the trash conversation, and I don't know how much that's changed since the last override. I don't think much. The consensus has seemed to stay that people want their trash picked up and they want it in the town's budget. We've had discussions about the buying the bags, pay to throw, all kinds of different scenarios, but the townspeople have, to this point anyways, felt very strongly, enough so to have two overrides. So unless you're going to give that money back.
Which we absolutely would. And that's my point, is that we wouldn't, whatever we do to change it, whatever the overrides amounts were, we would want to give back. So an underride, so to speak. And then going forward, we would just annually set a fee that we think would be appropriate, and set it up as a revolving account or enterprise or whatever, but an account where we would have a contingency in there if things were going to go over, and certainly if it built up too much, we would be able to reduce the fee, but we'd be able to send the fees out along with the tax or water bills or something else. Or I know, Sonia, would we send them out with the tax bills or something to that effect?
We'd probably mirror the water and sewer billing because the accounts would line up pretty closely. And if I can, I have a note from Marty's information to us that the overrides were in 91 and 08, and they totaled $1,225,000. So we're budgeting $1,350,000. We're obviously over the override at this point.
Right. It has always been a very hot button issue. There was at one time issues around trash and what do you call the center, the hauling center, the
compost site?
No.
Transfer station?
The transfer station?
Transfer station, which resulted in, I think it was pretty much the entire board of health being recalled. So just putting my 2 cents in that I think it'd be hard, just in past experience, I think it would be hard pressed to get it out of the budget. But clearly we need to do something because the costs and certainly we never thought we'd be in a position where we'd be paying more per ton to remove recycle than we were paying to remove trash. That was supposed to, at one point,
the other way.
Yeah, well, at one point we were paying, it was half.
At one point we were being paid for recycling.
Yeah.
A very long time ago. And then it was zero.
But it's crept up and it was, trash was X amount per ton and recycle was half of that per ton. And so, and now it's gotten to where it's costing us more to recycle. I'm not in any way saying that we shouldn't be recycling. I'm just saying, the way the costs are trending and trying to keep up with that in our budget is, I think we need to think out of the box maybe.
Yeah, and Scott, what are surrounding towns doing?
So when I was on the board in Whitman, we did sort of the rollback method, and then we put it out that it's a separate fee, and it goes out twice a year, and the selectmen set that fee based on the prior year's tipping charges. Again, there's usually, you put a small, a modest contingency in there to cover any possible upticks. And we had years that we set the fee that we actually reduced it because we had better years than expected. In Duxbury, they switched to they have a transfer station, and it's a pay as you throw, so you buy the bags. So it's different. Some towns had curbside, but you had to use the bags till everybody switched to having to use the bucket because you wanted the automated buckets to pull, to pick up the refuse. So it just depends. We're not in a position that we could do a transfer station. So that's never going to happen. So we're tied to do curbside. And if that's the case, we continue on as we're doing, but it's going to continue to eat away at other things and other programs and other departments. There's no way around it. It's, unless the recycling goes back to becoming somewhat of a commodity, that's just the cold hard truth of it. And there's nothing different we can do.
I think the argument too being that, you take it out of the budget, people are still paying taxes. We're going to replace that with something else. And then they're going to be also paying a trash fee.
Well, that's why I said we would return their override, but yeah, they're still paying. I mean, but at least it's not continually eating away at the budget. And, here they are, they've already gone beyond it. And it's, I don't know. I think it's important, and I think that this committee has to keep talking about it, and I think we have to discuss it with the selectmen. And I've kicked around the idea of putting a subcommittee together, but to be quite honest with you, I think it's more a task that that this committee and the Board of Selectmen have to tackle, whether it's independently, jointly, or however we do it. We'll try and give you some options, but there aren't really a lot of them out there. Like I said, the transfer station model will not work because we don't have a place to put a transfer station, and there was obviously, as you pointed out, little or no appetite for having one.
None.
So that's out. So that makes it difficult to do as a pay as you throw program, because that's typically how that works. You buy the bags, and you can only bring the bags that are I would guess Abington Green with the beaver on it will be the only ones that you'd be able to bring to that transfer station. So since we can't do that, you can't do that curbside. It doesn't work because they're not going to check the inside of the barrels to make sure that they're filled with the appropriate bags.
And Scott, what's the potential impact if you did the rollback method to homeowners?
I don't know, Sonia, did we kicked it? I don't know if we discussed what, if we took 1.2 million and returned it, I don't know what that would break down to.
I don't, I can, if I did. If I divided it, we have about 5,500 real estate parcels. If it was even, that's about $225 a parcel. Of course, there are fewer parcels that would be getting billed for trash because many of our parcels are land. But that's a very base average number of what a tax, a normal parcel would see taken off their bill. And so then those land parcels would no longer be paying anything that would be going towards trash. It would just be the parcels that actually have trash would be getting billed.
And Scott, you brought this up a couple of months ago, so it's obviously a priority. It's something that you're concerned about. So what is the next steps to get the discussion going to deal with it? Because is it realistic to deal with it in this year's budget, or is it something for FY20
No, it's not realistic to think that we're going to be able to solve this problem between now and town meeting. And it's not, it'll be difficult to get it done by the subsequent town meeting, because I think from everything that I've seen and heard, that everybody is adamant that they want curbside. And what will happen is, the deeper that we go into it, the things like Sonia says, you'll see that while the rollback affects everybody, the new pricing structure is only going to affect households.
Doesn't affect everyone evenly.
Right. And it won't affect them evenly. And so that's going to cause, some serious issues. And so we have to think about that. How do we do this and make it even? And I don't know what that answer is. And it's not, and unfortunately, it's not the only thing we've got to think about. So we can't devote as much time to it as we need now. Probably after town meeting, we could spend more time talking about it, thinking about it, trying to kick some ideas around. But something has to give, the other consideration is we have to just look at it like every other department that's going to grow, or look like this is something that's going to grow proportionally or disproportionately to our ability to raise taxes.
And, it grows, whether it's in our budget, the town's budget, or on the homeowner, the cost of trash continues to go up. So even if we instituted a program that was outside of our budget, that cost each year is still going to go up for the homeowner.
Yeah. Yeah, there's no doubt. I'm not saying, believe me, it's not going to save, at the end of the day, it's not going to save the homeowner money. It's going to, if anything, what it's going to do is just save the stress that it's going to be putting on other departments within the town and other services. This is a bill that we absolutely have, and we absolutely have to pay.
Right.
And so if it continues to grow and we can't grow our budget proportionally, then you're going to see it affecting services somehow, whether it's a reduction in, it's going to be a reduction in something.
I think looking at better ways to assist in funding it might be worth our while. However, whatever programs or, out of the box thinking that we can do to find a better way to fund it.
Barbara, I have a great idea.
Hit me, Greg.
The millions of dollars that that we already received from these pod places, I believe we should just pay for the rubbish. And I still actually don't think we should be paying for recycling, considering they don't actually recycle it, the majority of it. But if we had to, I think we could talk to Bezanson and get that signed off on.
Grass for trash. That's Greg's motto. Right?
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. Like, how can we create a revenue stream within the town that will help to fund this?
So
I'm throwing that question out there. I don't have any ideas. I'm just saying we need to do something to solve it. And if the townspeople are very set on curbside, and so we can't change with the transfer station isn't welcome and those types of things, then looking on the other side of the coin,
because if we create a new revenue stream, I think Sonia is going to recommend that we put it towards OPEB. So we have there's some other pressing issues that we need to throw revenue at too.
Right.
So that
Absolutely.
There's definitely no easy answer.
Right.
But I mean, I guess my position is, why do we look at this any different than any other municipal service? You know what I mean? Like it's going to increase over year, but I mean, we accept that with everything else: the fire department, the police department, the DPW.
Yeah. So,
and this is pretty much 100% contracted out too. So we're not absorbing long-term pension costs or liabilities and healthcare or anything like that associated with trash collection. So why, from a homeowner's perspective, I'm going to be assessed additional fee for what is a basic municipal service.
Yeah.
So, Drew, I think Scott's where Scott's coming from on that is that this one is increasing at a rate that's significantly faster or higher, like that the costs are increasing faster than what the general budget increases at, and that what the general budget can keep up with. And so should we treat it similarly to, for example, water, where we have a fee for the water that we use?
I see the point, but I mean, water, sewer have infrastructure built into them as well that we need to maintain, that we need to do debt service to keep
absolutely.
up with.
And that,
I mean, again, that's
why this is a big discussion and argument.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but I guess, Scott, if the longer we keep trash in our budget, the more likely it is to impact us being able to add a nurse or add another employee or absorb other salaries or add positions or add a town planner. It's going to sap resources from other budgets. That's essentially what you're saying, right? Is that if we were to compartmentalize it better, then it's going to reduce the potential to sap resources that are needed elsewhere within the town's budget because it is growing disproportionately.
Exactly.
And Russ, a lot of the increase right now is being driven by the fact that, like Greg was saying, there's no place to the recycle. They don't have any place to send the recycle. So it's increasing the cost to haul away our recycling is increasing faster than we can keep up with it. And there's nothing being done on the other end to solve that problem. And that's kind of out of our hands. We have no control over when we can find places that will take the recycling.
Yeah. I mean, it would be great. I mean, and you never know, maybe a year from now, 2 years from now, a new technology does come along or a new method comes along that they start recycling again, and all of a sudden it does commodify and the prices drop dramatically. I mean, that would be great. And it's not, I'm sure there are this isn't a problem that's unique to Abington. So I think that there are probably a lot of much brighter than me people who are trying to figure it out. But
the other thing that we've been saying since this started going south was maybe the global recycling market opens back up. And because it's truly a global issue, and that's what has impacted us and every other municipality. Is recycling used to be a commodity that was on a global scale was bought, and it ceased becoming that. And the market essentially closed down. China shut down, the market closed, and everybody has been trying to figure out what to do with their recycling ever since. So if that were to ever open back up, if there was some innovation in the industry that created that opening again, it could change things. And we've been hoping and praying for that day to come back around. But at some point we may need to do something more than hoping and praying.
Or we've been waiting for Greg to open up a business to be able to absorb it for the greater Eastern Massachusetts area.
Yeah.
He's very enterprising.
It's a lot bigger than Eastern Massachusetts, but
Well, I know, but I'm just trying, baby steps. You can't take the whole country on a burst.
Start local.
Yeah.
Again, my problem is paying more for the recycling than it is for the trash, knowing it goes into a landfill.
Greg, I think what Russ was saying to you was think global, act local.
I got you. I'll do it.
Greg, I'm with you. It burns me every time. I'm sticking. No, I'm trying to fit stuff into my recycle bin. It burns me every time knowing that.
Yeah, and I never even understood it till somebody told me that you couldn't put a pizza box with grease in there and all this. I mean, I had no idea. So all of those things, besides, we are going to get a pretty, again, millions of dollars. I know I'm being funny a lot of times, but we're going to have 5 of these places open at some point in time. This could offset the cost. I'm assuming it can offset the cost of other stuff as well, but it should be a decent revenue stream at some point. If this does get out of hand, you could always use that.
No, it will be a good revenue source, but it'll offset the budget as a whole. And I think, part of our financial policies will be that will be a dedicated revenue source for other things, OPEB being one of them. And, but to count on that as first of all, whatever that amount is, whether it's hundreds of thousands or millions, to count on that being a permanent fix to anything, probably not a good plan. I just don't know how sustainable that kind of industry is going to be when everybody in the world is inviting them in and opening up shops and facilities, and it becomes federally permitted over the next few years. Then you can cross state lines in it, and there's going to become areas that are going to be much more attractive than Abington to grow and to cultivate and to sell from. So what I'm saying is I'm not tying my pony to that wagon.
But when we look at the budget, though, who's setting the priorities for it? To Russ's point, is it to cover the cost of trash removal, or is it extra library hours? Is it making sure classroom sizes don't get over 25? Is it having a public health nurse? It's like we go through this process and we just talk about the numbers, and we can all deal with those, but it's like, what are the priorities for the town? Because I'm sure when the override happened in 91, the priorities for Abington were different. I've been like Barbara, I've been in this town my whole life. We're different than they are today. And even where they were in, say, 2005 or 2008. So who's setting those priorities? Because it's like that dictates a lot of the direction we're going to go.
I do think that the town speaks when we have when we have an override in 2008. That's the townspeople setting that as a priority. There hasn't been an override for that I can remember for anything else like that. And so that to me says it's a priority, but I also 2008 was, a few years ago. So we certainly could, well, after this meeting, you can probably look on Life in Abington or one of those type pages tomorrow and you'll know.
I can also put it out. We have an ability with one of the projects that we're working on with to enhance our social media presence, and they enhance our website presence and stuff. But we do have the ability to do occasional monthly surveys, open-ended surveys and questions and stuff. And I can actually, I think I'll put one together next month that will kind of try and get a sentiment as best we can on what people's feelings are and where would they like to go with it. At the end of the day, we have to live with it. And we'll adjust the budget accordingly. And, hopefully there'll be a day when it starts to level off or not, increase as dramatically. there's certain things that come up that we're faced with. This is one of them. Health insurance is always one of them. Regular insurance as well. There's certain expenses that we don't have a lot of control over that just grow beyond our ability to raise taxes. And we have no choice but to have it affect services. And this may be another one of them. And that may just be the way it goes. But, I think if they haven't had the discussion since 2008, then it's time to have it again. And if at the end of the day we decide we're not going to change anything, then we're not going to change anything. But it does have to happen with this committee. To get to, I think, to Paul's question is, I think it has to start with this committee and with the Board of Selectmen. And that's kind of where you set, where I get my cues from, where I get my direction from.
But has the Board of Selectmen even discussed this?
Absolutely.
When's the last time they talked about this?
I don't know. I talk to them all the time. I talk to them daily. We haven't had it. We've had the minor discussion of that, hey, we have to deal with this. But personally, I think it probably could be a joint meeting. We have one planned and we have another one. I mean, it's a much bigger discussion.
And possibly with public participation.
Absolutely.
Might be helpful to have a joint meeting specifically on this subject, inviting the public with, to gauge, what the interest or disinterest is.
Right. Well, wouldn't that be at the Board of Selectmen? I mean, they're the elected officials here. I mean, they're representing people who put them in office. We're appointed. Like, why are we sitting in a joint meeting with the Board of Selectmen when they haven't even set this as a priority? Scott, I haven't seen anything on a Board of Selectmen meeting. I saw him spend 20 minutes talking about where to park a food truck, but I haven't heard him say anything about trash.
You've heard me say it at the Selectmen meetings. I've said it over and over. And I do think that it is important.
Recently?
Yeah.
Well, I think too, because the Board of Selectmen don't deal as much with the budget fine detail as we do. There might not be as much, conversation. I'm not saying there shouldn't be. I'm just saying that we tend to, because we're looking to see, how can we, fund this or fund that, and
I don't disagree, Barbara, but maybe they should. I mean, if you look at the town charter, aren't they the CEOs of the town of Abington? Technically, we've got a strong town manager, but that's their role.
We did used to have several of the selectmen on a regular basis would come to our meetings when we were having budget discussions so that they would get that finer detail. And, we're kind of in a different situation now as far as how we're doing our meetings. So I'm sure that they're tuning in and watching. But I think a joint meeting would be beneficial because we do have the fine detail that they don't.
I mean, we need a lot of input on this, and you guys are, your committee, the finance committee has certainly the pulse of the budget. And I'm not disagreeing that we do have to involve the selectmen, and they've looked to me for answers for this also. I'd be happy to have more discussions with them. I think it's just the discussions I've had with them was that I was hoping to put together a subcommittee or a trash talk committee, as I was calling it, but I don't think that I need it. I don't think it needs another committee. I think it needs to be made up of the committees that we have. And then, as Barbara said, I think, we need a lot of public input on this one. There's no sense in, I'm not looking to make any crazy changes without, finding out exactly what is best. I mean, if like we said, if the consensus of the town is keep things as they are and deal with it, then that's exactly what we'll do.
And lots of times you have when you have those meetings, those joint meetings, one in particular that comes to mind with a lot of public participation was back during the 2009, during the financial crisis back then. We were trying to save certain departments, and you can there's residents in the town that have experience in areas that we might not have, or, we had one meeting where a former selectman stood up and said, well, you can actually get that money from, and it had something to do, we had to get it was truly a act of Congress. Like actually, it actually was like an act of, you had to be able to, but we were able to, none of us knew that, and that was a source even at the time. And it ended up being like $50,000 that we were, at meetings till midnight looking for. And because we had this tremendous amount of participation, somebody else that had an idea that the rest of us didn't. So something like that, I think for this situation could be really beneficial.
I'd like to say one thing. I think what would move this forward is we keep talking about, oh, well, this and this. I haven't seen anything that lays out the numbers about what it really means. I get the impression that the trash is growing faster than the 2.5% that we can grow our budget. So it naturally will eat in if it's left in the real budget. And the reason why it's different than fire and police is, or anything else, is because we don't have any control over what the trash increase is. We can control to some degree the others. But before we can make a decision, and before the public can really make a good decision, other than their emotional decision, maybe they will never make anything other than their emotional decision. But still, it would be nice to have laid out a presentation that says, this is why you choose this way. You may not want to choose it anyway, but this is the reasoning behind it. And right now, I know it's in your head, Scott, but and I got some of the gist of it, but I still don't have the whole gist of it and the trade-offs that, like Andrew was saying, and the $225 a person, but that's only homeowners and not landowners make out because they get money back even though they never paid. They've never had any trash, things like that.
Well, I think it's great. I think it's great that we're having the discussion finally. But I do agree that we need more information. You need us to put some more information together. I don't really have anticipated getting done before town meeting. And I think we have more work that we have to do. I think I would like to see this committee meet with the selectmen, and we'll provide as much background and as much of a plan as we possibly can, and bring the public in and see what they would like to do. Another thing though, like and Barbara touched on this, and another consideration that I have in all of it is that if there's something that we can do different, is there something that we can do that isn't even changing the way we pick it up or the way that we budget it, but maybe there's something we can do as homeowners that, do we try composting? Do we support a way that people can compost and not throw as much stuff away? And that'll obviously reduce the tipping fees. And
talking to the Green Committee, who may have ideas that we just might not.
We might not be thinking of.
Yeah.
Right.
So the idea, my thought isn't necessarily that we just have to get it out of the budget or that we just have to charge extra for it. It's that we have to do something. And and Paul's right. I think I think it's my task to go to the leaders and to say to them, look, I need you guys to buy into this and help me get a discussion going, and let's get the finance committee in, and let's get the health department in, and let's get the citizens in, and let's try and find a way to make it work. I'm all for it.
Two things, Scott. I love that we're having the conversation, and two, I love your idea about pooling the town. I think, or whatever surveys, whatever it's called.
Yeah.
That's great.
It's a good start.
Awesome. That's great.
Yeah.
That's perfect.
I agree. All right. Other points of discussion there? We've had a pretty good one on this. Sonia, I saw you sent out the latest overall budget. I had it up. I can share it again if we want, but it looked very similar to last week when we were discussing.
Similar, but the bottom line is a lot better. We still have a lot of negotiations that have not been settled for union contracts. So, you can see in that right-hand number, that 172, we're finally in the black now. Once those negotiations are settled, though, I expect that we'll be back in the red. So we still have a lot of work to do. We're going in the right direction, but we certainly we're still sharpening our pencils. We're still, Scott is still negotiating with the unions that are still out, police, fire, DPW, and the managers union. And those are big ones. Yep. So, we anticipate that we still have decisions to make.
Okay. Anyone have any overall questions or comments? All right.
Matt, can you just go to the bottom?
Yep.
I just want to. So the figures. Sonia, can you just explain that? This 60.5 million versus the 63.1.
Sure. So the revenues comprise of the tax levy, which is that top yellow bar that you see there, as well as estimated state revenue, local receipts, and then other operational funds. So the state revenue we are using in the right-hand column, the fiscal 23 estimates from the governor's proposal for state revenue. On the expenditure side, we're using the governor's proposal estimate for the state assessments that kind of offset some of these revenues. For the local receipts, we came up with these numbers on the right-hand column by looking back 5 years to see trends. Certain revenues go up a certain amount every year. Some are relatively flat, some are up and down. You can't necessarily predict one way or the other. So in those situations, an average is usually sufficient. So we look at each of these types of revenues and come up with an estimate. The motor vehicle, we like to be pretty conservative on our estimate with this one because that can go down. Some years it goes up, some years it goes down. It's very difficult to predict, especially where the large commitment won't happen until the middle of the fiscal year that we're talking about. I have no idea what's going to happen in a year. So I'm hoping that it'll be higher than our fiscal year 21 number, but I don't know yet what our fiscal year 23 will be. Or 22, I mean. So we try to be conservative with this because if it does go down, we don't want to be caught trying to find money to cover our operational expenses. The others are a little easier to estimate.
Sorry, I guess my question was much more basic than that. So it looks like the department from the structure of this spreadsheet, the departments are requesting 60.5 million and we're proposing a budget of 63.1 million. So we should have a surplus.
The middle column is FY22, the current fiscal.
Oh, okay.
It
says FY23 at the top.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
Up at the top. So this top section that's all in bold, that's exactly. Those go together.
This part is 22, 23 department requested, and then 23 town manager.
Yep.
So the middle, for the part that I have highlighted, the left-hand column is last year's or the current year's budget. The middle column was sort of the starting point of the budget process, and then the right-hand column is the continuously moving where we're at right now.
Right.
And then down
and technically
in all of this part that I'm now
highlighting. Technically the levy for the taxes that would go up with those
Okay.
with the top section.
Okay. So this,
Yes.
this up here goes
Right.
with the top.
Yep.
And then from here down, this is all
Fiscal year 21, fiscal year 22 estimates, and then fiscal year 23 estimates.
there we go.
Gotcha. Thank you. I was just looking at the last column there and okay. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
It's a good point, Drew.
It took me a minute to
The budget kind of
get this into my brain as well.
changes columns halfway down the page. So.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Any other comments, questions there? Definitely good stuff so far. All right. That brings us to the end of the new business portion of our agenda. Next up on our agenda is liaison reports. Does anyone have any?
I don't.
Anyone else? I'm not looking at the moment because I'm trying to grab the minutes. We do not have correspondence. So I'm going to share our minutes. We have minutes from last week's meeting, the January 26th meeting. Trying to share. Where the heck is it?
What day was the DPW? field trip?
Saturday,
Saturday the 5th at 11:30.
So I'll double check with John just on, I'm not sure what the weather is forecast at this point.
Oh,
I think Saturday is
another
looking
storm
better
coming?
than Friday. Friday is supposed to be kind of difficult as the middle part of the day and the evening is supposed to be quite cold and icy. I'm sure they'll be busy there.
Saturday looks cold but sunny according to my forecast I'm looking at right now. Low of 8, high of 25. Balmy.
We'll have hot toddies for everyone.
But yes, we have a tour of the DPW facilities on Saturday at 11:30 for anyone that can make it.
Matt, are we meeting at Central Street or?
Yes, we are meeting at the
okay.
Highway Department building next to the police station on Central Street.
Thank you.
All right. Meeting minutes. We have minutes from the January 26th meeting, which were provided to us earlier today that were put together by Recording Secretary Emeritus, Deb Libby. Deb went through and put together the minutes for us. I reviewed them. I think they look good. There were a few things I had her correct ahead of time. Anyone with any motions or comments on the meeting minutes?
Motion to approve the meeting minutes of January 26, 2022.
There's a motion.
Second.
There's a second from Drew. So motion from Barbara, second from Drew. Is there any discussion on the meeting minutes from January 26th? Without any, all those, I'll do a roll call vote for those. And I am now realizing I should have done a roll call attendance. So I'll do that now as well. But hang on, let me expand my view screen. Actually, I'll stop sharing. That'll make it easier for me to see everyone. Okay, so roll call. I'll go by who I see in the windows. Paul. Paul gives a thumbs up. So an
Yes.
aye.
Aye.
Chris.
Approved.
Drew.
Aye.
Russ.
Approved.
Daniel. Daniel said aye. To mute. Barbara.
Aye.
Greg. Greg's also on mute. I will vote aye. If I don't hear anything from Greg in the next 10 seconds, I will have Greg abstain.
No, we're good. I couldn't get off mute.
There we go. Figured as much. All right, so the meeting minutes are approved. That is the last bit of our last scheduled item on our agenda. Our next meeting is scheduled for next week, February 9th. Just a quick look. I'm struggling to find the right meeting minutes. I somehow messed up the dates on the minutes that I have, or not minutes, on the agendas that I have. But February 9th, we will be meeting with Abington Cam and then the town manager, who we never meet with, and the other town manager presented budgets. So that is what is on tap for next week.
I think we were also going to have.
Oh, that's right. The town accountant got moved to next week. So I will make sure to add that before I send out the agenda.
And I think that was when we had moved Scott and Sonia's presentation on the CARES Act money and.
Yep, that's gonna be Andrew. He's put a great presentation together for you guys for that, for wrap up on the CARES Act and an overview on what's on the ARPA funds.
Okay, great. So that's next week.
Yes.
All right, so that is what's scheduled for next week. Is there anyone else that has anything for this week?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Or a motion to adjourn in a second. Is there any discussion? Without any discussion, I will roll call our adjournment. Paul?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Drew?
Aye.
Russ?
Aye.
Daniel?
Aye.
Barbara?
Aye.
Greg on mute. Trying to get off. Aye. And I vote aye as well. Thank you, everyone. We are adjourned. Appreciate all of your time.
Thank you.
Scott and Sonia, thank you
Take
again.
care.
Guys.
Oh, hold on.